Dear community, whether you're watching or listening to this podcast right now, we are more than happy to welcome you to our very first episode of the EBS Symposium Podcast. My name is Felix Klein. I'm a member of the board and the head of finance and legal of the 35th EBS Symposium and will be your host for the upcoming sessions. In this podcast, we're going to explore the rich history of our Congress, we'll dive into interesting discussions with renowned speakers, and we'll get valuable industry insights from our corporate partners. In our first episode, we are welcoming Steffen Seifarth, one of the co-founders of the EBS Symposium, investor, and managing director at the Berlin Angel Fund. Enjoy listening and have fun. Hello, Steffen. Thank you for being our very first guest of our EBS Symposium podcast.
It's a great pleasure. I'm very good, thank you. I'm a little bit excited, I have to admit, because this is only my second podcast recording, but let's see what we can make out of it.
Great. So, of course, we are here today to talk about the origins of the symposium, but why don't we start by you introducing yourself to us and the listeners?
Sure. My name is Steffen. I was born in Frankfurt, 1968, so a long time ago, last millennium. And yes, I started my studies at EBS in 89.
Yes.
And 89, as some of you will remember, was a remarkable year for Germany because the fall of the Berlin Wall triggered the reunification. And that indeed is what triggered the idea for what we today call the symposium. Well, so we'll come to that later, I think. So introducing myself, I then finished my studies at EBS, which were great, I have to personally say, because not only did I learn some relevant things, I made a lot of very good friends for life. And then moved on to doing decent work, first at Procter & Gamble and then later on in the cosmetics industry. And so today I'm working independently as a startup investor, and I'm managing a small venture capital fund. So I'm very happy so far with the different perspectives I was able to take.
Perfect, very impressive. So, as you already said, we're going to talk about the history of how everything arose. So let's head over to the symposium. I believe many of us know the symposium and what it is today, with the speeches, career fairs and workshops. But as I remember, when we had our kickoff at BCG in Frankfurt, you told us that the whole idea and purpose of the symposium was something completely different back then. And I remember you joked about sitting in a bar in Hattenheim, but I'll leave the whole story to you.
Yeah, the Hattenheim and bar point is absolutely true. So yeah, what was it? I mean, there was obviously nothing like that when we joined EBS, so my year. But then, as I already said, it was 89, the Berlin Wall came down. Yeah. And that was, of course, a huge event, and each of us knew this would be a major point of change for Germany. So one evening in November, we were sitting in that bar in Hattenheim. It still exists. It's called Perron, but I don't think students go there very much anymore. No. Okay, we used to. And my good friend Alex Böhler, then said to me, "Hey, look, all these developments going on. What are we going to do about it? How can we contribute?" And that was the whole starting point, where we said, we're students, we're studying economics, where there is a major change coming towards us. What does that mean for us, for Germany, for the world, etc.? And that's how we came up with the title, Germany, a term that needs to be newly defined. And then we said, okay, let's go out and find other students that want to discuss this. Let's find companies, CEOs, whoever, from different fields who are ready to discuss this, and some professors. And let's do that by finding people from East Germany and West Germany and bring them together here at EBS. That was the idea, and then we had to bring it to life. Yeah,
sure. You already mentioned your motto. The motto of the Pro 90 was made in Germany, a term to be redefined. Can you tell us more on how you embedded this motto in your congress? For example, how did you manage to reach out to all the companies from the German Democratic Republic? Because when I think of that, for me, it had to be very difficult to reach out to companies that were established in a state which was very isolated. So how did you choose the companies? How did you reach out to them, and what was the reaction?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because remember, we're talking 89, so of course there was no internet, there were no cell phones, and of course these were still two separate countries. The answer is quite simple. Two of us jumped in a car and went on a tour across Eastern Germany, targeting university campuses and companies, and using every kind of connection they could possibly find, and collected and made connections, and some of them actually made it then to what we call Pro 90. Yes.
Great. And when I think of our team today, we are about 40 members with all different departments. We have a corporate relations team, we have a speaker relations team, and all different actions. But when I looked at some photos in our office, there were very small team sizes in the beginning. How did you choose or you already mentioned that you just went out and said, look, whoever wants to join us can join us, but how was your team synergy? How did you start the whole thing? Like, did you have any red line you were following, or did you just
I would say we absolutely had to improvise. And so in the beginning, and I mentioned that, especially evening, it was Alex and me. And then we talked to Peter Schmitz, a friend of ours, so we were three. And later on, we had a fourth person joining. But essentially, I would say 3-4 people were the core team. But then we got a lot of support. We got a lot of support from our peers, from other students. We obviously, when we were trying to reach out to companies over the summer, because we already started a bit late. We were looking who's doing an internship where, who can make us a connection, etc., etc. So there we got a lot of support. And then for the event itself, of course, as well. There was a shuttle service organized. There was somebody collecting people who were coming from East Germany at the main station in Frankfurt, guiding them to the campus in Österreich-Winkel, which is not so easy to find when you're not used to it, and all these things. So I can't give you an exact number, but today you have, I think you call them the PACES.
So
that idea, we didn't call them that, but that was already existing there. So every speaker had somebody to take care of him. There was sleepovers were organized. So a lot of other students obviously gave us their support. Otherwise it wouldn't have been possible. But the core team were really 3 and then later on 4 people.
And you already said you started your studies in 89, right? And the first Pro 90 also, or at least the idea also came up in 89.
The idea was born in 89, in November, when the wall came down. The event itself was then in 90.
Right.
So right after the summer break.
So, but you were a first semester student at that point of time. How was the reaction from maybe other semester students? Were there some people that maybe smiled upon you or doubted that you were actually able to build something like that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Somebody may have smiled. We had no time to look at that. What was important for us and what was crucial, obviously, was on day 3 probably. We went to see Klaus Ewart, the founder and then still president of EBS, and told him about the idea. And that was like a 3-minute conversation when he said, look, I like it. You can have the campus. I'll pay for the food. And the rest you have to organize yourself. And off we went. So we felt that was great support, and with that basis we then said we'll go. And very likely that some people said, oh, crazy, rather than preparing for exams, they're trying to organize this thing. But the motivation from the idea was so huge that we didn't really think about that.
Great. Yeah, that's still a point, managing the time for the symposium and exams, but that's not the point of today. And so we spoke a lot about how everything originated, but can you give us a broad impression of the Congress itself? So was it already a 2-day Congress, and just give us an idea of what everything looked like?
It was a 2-day event. basically then what we try to do is also touch or cover different perspectives of this whole thing happening. So different industries, education, because we had students there, and then politics as far as, you know, they were relevant. So, you know, how to unify two completely different systems. So that I would call the political part. I can't remember by heart all the different subjects that there were, but it was really centered around this whole point of the reunification and how to tackle the different elements.
Sure. And you already mentioned quite a bit, but what was the reaction after your first, or the first Pro 90, maybe from a perspective from your peers and also from the companies you had at the Pro 90 and also the university? Can you maybe elaborate a bit on that?
Looking back, I would say everybody was quite happy. Quite happy. How do I know this, or how would I determine that? Because we received a lot of support during the event. Nobody complained. Let's take that as an indication that they were quite happy. There was not anything like, we have to do this again, etc. By the time. What we therefore did was we had our bank account, and it still carried roughly 1,000 Deutschmarks. So we say, okay, we give that to whoever from the new semester is interested in organizing a similar thing, and then we basically took off. So that's also why, yes, I every now and then heard that there was another Pro 90, or then later on it was called Symposium. But I personally only really came back to this thing in 2018, and really by chance, because somebody said, hey, there's this interesting thing going on, don't you want to go and support these students? And then I said, oh, that's really interesting, because I founded this thing 30 years ago. And then when I met all the ex-chairmen who had, you know, accumulated basically in the meantime, that was really a very emotional moment for me to see how this idea, and I mean it was born from a very specific event that obviously didn't reoccur later on, but still the thought of a student organized, and I mean really first semester student organized event, symposium at EBS, obviously was so strong that it survived for 30, and now we're going towards 35 or even 40 years. And that touched me. That was really touching.
So already mentioned or answered my question.
Okay, sorry for jumping in.
No, of course. But I was wondering, but that was probably then the time in 2018 when you realized that you have built something sustainable, something that evolved over the years and then really growed into something remarkable, because when you're saying you started as a group of 4 and then you see all the different chairmen with maybe the new team in 2018, well, I don't know, back then probably the 29.
This was 29 or so. It was briefly before the 30th anniversary.
It must have been quite impressive.
It was very impressive, and it was very touching, and even more so because we never built or created it with the intention, you know, to have something that would go on for 30 years. I think what happened somehow is that by doing what we did, we gave, maybe it's a big word, but kind of an example that you can do it, that there is the possibility to create something like that. And looking back today, I would say that this is maybe the spark, you know, that ignited the energy or the motivation of other people again and again. And that's what I keep seeing today, because every year it's the same thing. Today, I don't know how many you were, but 30, 40 young students say, I want to spend so much of my time in organizing the symposium that I'm not sure I'm going to pass all my exams. So what a crazy idea. But there has to be something there. And that's what, without planning to do this, obviously we triggered.
And to be honest, we're still very thankful you came up with the idea because it still provides us with a big learning opportunity. I mean, you get basically handed over all the responsibilities after the previous Congress is over, and then you're there for the moment and you think, okay, so how are we going to do this? What do we start? And then of course there are the former chairman that provide you with help, but first of all you're in the situation and you have to come up with an idea and plan the whole Congress. And I think that's a great way to get the first hands-on impression, maybe even before your first internship, on how to act and behave in the real business world.
Yeah.
And regarding to that, was there any specific learning or something you took out of your Congress or organizing the whole event? Was that something you realized later on that maybe was foundational?
I mean, there were many personal learnings, and you just mentioned some of them. But if I was to pinpoint one single element, then it's also what you indirectly said, that it's your responsibility. Yeah? It's not about the ex-chairman or the university or anybody else to tell you should do it this way or that way. It's really about you as a group of young people expressing your ideas and creating the symposium as you think it should be done today. Because every year there are new subjects around that are worth discussing. Every, let's call it generation, or every year that there are other topics, or there's a different group of people who wants to steer it in a somehow different direction. And I think that's exactly what it is made for. It's not like because we did it this way that everybody has to do it this way. No, it's really the idea of saying, hey, what's on our mind, what is bugging us, what is really making us, stealing us the sleep at night. Let's bring it on the table and let's discuss it here, because that's one forum for it. And then by doing that, realizing that you're not alone. That when you take this idea and hold it up and say, this is what we want to do, you will get help from many other places, from the university, from other students, from companies, etc. And that's a great experience. Of course, it's also burden is the wrong word. It's a responsibility, and you have to be willing to take it on. But if you do, to see then the kind of support you get, I think that probably and hopefully is one of the most important learnings you can have as a young person.
Sure. And maybe drawing this to your professional experience. After you graduated from EBS, I think in '93, right?
That's right.
You started your career at Procter & Gamble, as you mentioned, and had a few steps in between, became the CEO of Moiran Birds, and most recently, as you already said, you're functioning as a managing director at the Berlin Angel Fund. And also when I think of the current economic situation we are facing right now in Germany, this also reminds me of our topic. It's called Turning Tides from Crisis to Opportunity. Do you observe this development also right now in your position? Are there any trends in the startup scene? Anything you can observe which also is directly related to tackle this development? Or does it even affect the startup scene right now? Are people getting more cautious when founding?
A couple of thoughts on that. As far as the startup scene is concerned, yes. I mean, there have been significant, let's call it ups and downs. 2021, really euphoria, and then very difficult years due to the change in interest rates, due to, of course, the war, other elements. So it's much more, not only much more difficult for startups today to raise additional funding rounds, the expectations have also significantly changed. It used to be grow. Now it is like grow, but make it in a profitable way or have a plan B, etc., which makes a lot of sense economically, but of course is a different, difficult path to steer for a very young, company with development needs, etc. So more demanding to that end. Turning crisis into opportunity, I think, is a very good title because it makes me think back to one of my professors with whom I wrote my thesis at EBS, Professor Ulrich Grimm, who by then used to say, you only change in crisis. And well, I was young and I said, okay, yeah, sounds logical, but yeah, how relevant is that in real and practical life today and in today's situation? I would say, yeah, that is very relevant. And I would even say we're at a point where there is still too much resistance to change, even though we already have enough of a critical context. So, but even more, so how deep, how severe does a crisis have to become for some parts of the society, the economy, the political system, etc., to change? But yeah, crisis and change are very closely interlinked, and change and opportunity obviously as well. So good title, make something out of it.
Thank you. We're giving our best. And then coming to an end, Steffen, I still got a very important question, maybe not the most. Will you be there this year at our symposium?
I promise I will try.
Yeah.
It usually works. It's just there have been occasions where I couldn't make it, so yes, but I definitely try to be there, of course.
Okay, so before we end our today's session, any last words to our listeners? Maybe any advice you want to give out to young students, maybe entering their first job or just starting their studies?
I'm not sure whether I can give general advice, but really to you and the team, I mean, go for it. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So enjoy the ride. You have the motivation. I can see that you have the energy. Don't let it be too much of a burden, but create the greatest and most fantastic thing that you can, and be proud of what you create, and make sure it's your creation.
Sure, we will. Well then, Steffen, thank you for being our first guest today. It was a pleasure, and then hopefully we'll see you in September.
My pleasure indeed. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in for today's episode of the EBS Symposium Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the discussions on the origins of our EBS Symposium, how the idea came up at the bar and then ended up being carried on for now 35 years. If you're interested in more topics like the EBS Symposium, its corporate partners, speakers and other interesting personalities, please subscribe, leave a review and share this episode with your friends. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram for more content and updates. Stay tuned also for our next episode, where we will be hosting another interesting guest. So until then, be excited and goodbye.